Homies, welcome back. Hope you all are enjoying your self-imposed exiles. I'm glad you could spare a moment away from masturbating to join me as we do something a little bit different with Total War Warhammer 2, because today I'm going to work in some live battles, and instead of worrying about the hype building and the cinematics, we're talking straight army composition, tactics, and strategy. What was done well, what was done poorly, why armies are built the way they are, which should hopefully give some good insight into my line of thinking when I jump into a multiplayer lobby. The gameplay was recorded live, commentary is being done in post so I can, actually focus on the commentary itself and have a better view of the battlefield overall. So this is all post-game analysis, talk about what happened, what was done well, what was done poorly, all that good stuff. So this first game was played against Shetland Apache a few hours ago. My Lizardmen versus his Bretonnia. Now, this is not a very easy matchup for Bretonnia at all. Talk about the reasons why in a minute, but Shetland is a very experienced Brett player, and he's been working on builds to shut down the dino, so we thought we'd give it a shot. Now, this is what I like to call an old one's Deathstar, and really, it's the same type of build you might see against Chaos or Norska. Really compact death squad of Temple Guard and Spears, buffed up by a Slan Mage Priest, who's kind of the linchpin of this entire strategy. Lore of Light is super good here, especially on a thick toe to the stars. Net can pin high-value threats in place, and Barona's Time Warp is the steroid buff that Temple Guard need to quickly slice through all comers. Melee attack is the one thing they really need, and when you give that to them in an AoE spell, they will thrash cavalry and infantry alike. I also have a unit of Sacred Crossgores, kind of a niche unit, but I find them very powerful against Bretonnia because of their magic attacks, their high mass, and their high weapon strength, which lets them easily chunk through the peasant spams and the elite knights as well. And they're rolling with a Scarvet on a Carnosaur, whose job it is to tear route Cav and dual Hippogriffs or Paladins. All of this needs to stay really compact, so every element can be easily supported. You want to be able to hit as many units with Time Warp and the Bubble of No Board Save as possible, without being so blobbed up that a Chalice of Potions from Fae or Chain Lightning can kill a huge chunk of your army. Now for Shetland Apache's game plan, the idea is pretty simple, but not very easy to execute. As with any Death Star build you come up against, you either want to pull it apart and pick off the pieces that get isolated, or you just want to blow it up with magic and overwhelming damage output. Bretonnia can't easily blow this Lizardman build up at all, not with the AoE ward save. If he decided to cast a Chain Lightning, I cast the ward save and we're probably fine, and I could dodge it anyway, and it has a lot of HP, so chunking through it with magic is not easy, so they want to use that superior mobility and pull the Temple Guard away from the safety of their support, away from the Crossgores, away from the Scarvet, where they can then get a bunch of cycle charges into the Temple Guard in the back with the Hippogriff Knights and the Questing Knights and use all that AP to chunk them down and grind them out. So what he wants to do is use his Poison Archers to debuff my Elites and my Dinos, use the Braid Aborted Low on Albrecht to give his Hippogriff Knights and Questing Knights bonus first large, which they don't normally have, and then essentially just get aggressive with his cavalry, relying on this war of attrition that will hopefully be won with the help of the Lore of Life. He has healing, I don't, so he can afford to take some risky trades. So, first major mistake of the game, I was kind of shocked to see him charge into my Temple Guard so soon, and while my brain was going, does not compute, took me way longer to deploy my net than it should have. Looking back on it, Shetland is smart and his micro is fully devoted to those Questing Knights, so with the 5-second cast time on Net of Ammontok, there's no way I could have caught both. All he had to do was Delta Split both ways, so my alt click on the ground to try and catch both, it was greedy and way too slow anyway. Much safer play is just net one of those with point target instead of ground target and let my Sacred Crossgores and my Scarvet feast. That way I'd get at least one Questing Knight unit severely damaged, and we'd be in a much better position than wasting an overcast of an Ammontok and not catching any unit whatsoever. So that's a pretty big mistake, because that means one less net in the late game, that means one less Barona's Time Warp. That's kind of an issue. Now, Albrecht is just straight up charging in. He's straight up going full YOLO. He has a ton of mass, so he can push through Temple Guard relatively easily, and my dinos are still waiting on the wings. Do have a Feral Bastiladon, just for that really cheap terror alongside the Scarvet, and it gives me some additional mass as well. But you can see that Shetland is doing a great job of just being annoying on all my flanks, and already, I mean, we're only a couple minutes into the game, you can see the blob, the Death Star, is starting to break down a little bit. So at this stage, it's really important to make sure that your Temple Guard don't over pursue, that they don't get too far forward or too far back chasing after the stuff that's cycle charging you into oblivion. It's okay to let your Saurus Spears or your Skinks get charged. You're going to lose those no matter what. That's not a problem. But when you start losing a bunch of Temple Guard for free and not trading well with the Cav, then that's when things start getting a lot scarier. So I see these infantry that are on my right flank, and my job right now is to terror out those and get the really annoying meat shields off the field first. Bubble of Note going down to protect my Temple Guard on the front ranks, and that we're fighting Albrecht over on the left side. And a big question I have is how to use my banishment. So catching out a questing knight unit with that would be pretty good. If I can net it in place and then banish it to the warp, that might be a good way to deal some tremendous damage to the enemy cavalry. But I was noticing that I had a lot of infantry engaged on the front ranks. That's generally going to be a good time for you to pop that Baroness Time Warp. The plus 24 melee attack for everything that's fighting in melee, really going to let you chunk through the peasants so much quicker. And he does have 2 Grail Reliquaries, so that immune to terror, that immune to psych, will make it a lot harder for my Scarvet and my terror causing units to actually cause that terror. So those are also threats I have to worry about. And I have no mobility, so no way to shut down the back line. Basically have to tank through all the poison arrow fire, all the regular peasant bowman fire to get through this. Thankfully, Temple Guard have great shield block chance, and we have that ward save, so plenty of ways to counteract it, but they're gonna do some damage to me for sure. There's no getting around it. I was trying to catch out those defenders of the fleur-de-lis on my left flank with a net and banishment combo. I didn't realize until a little bit later that the net actually canceled my banishment, and so the net's still gonna catch them out, and we are gonna cycle charge. Get a nice counter charge, rather, with the Sacred Croxagores and the Scarvet, which will rout off the defenders of the Fleur-de-Lis. They're breaking off now, but instead, I had nothing to lay up my banishment to follow it up on the questing knights in the back lines, and so Shetland, being the good player that he is, just straight up dodged it, and kind of a waste. Got a little bit of kills on the peasant archers, but a little bit lucky with that arc. Didn't do enough damage there to really justify it, and we want to hold on to that banishment because there's still a decent amount of cavalry left. There's still a mostly full-strength unit of questing knights. There's still some that are harrying my back line, killing off a bunch of skinks, but all my important units, the 3 Temple Guard, the Star Chamber Guardians, Sacred Croxagore, and the Scarvet, and my Slan Mage Priest are all pretty close to full HP, so that's great for me. We're going to get a Blood Statuette of Spite to deal a little bit of damage, net them in place, and a Bubble of Nope to support as we charge in. Now, my Sacred Croxagores are not in a perfect position to deal tremendous damage to them. Ideally, what you want to do with the high mass infantry in a situation like this one is move them through the enemy unit and then get on the other side so they can't escape. Because if I pull my Sacred Croxagores all the way through while they're netted in place, those Hippogriff Knights aren't going anywhere. The Scarvet will be munching on their butts from behind, Croxagores will be punching them in the face from the front like Rocky, yo Adrian! And then the Hippogriff Knights have nowhere to go. And if the Hippogriff Knights die at this point in the battle, it's gonna be extremely difficult for Bretonnia to come back. But they managed to escape. You got a regrowth at the right time, gave them a bunch of vigor, a bunch of health, and they take off. And I wasn't quite able to get the Sacred Croxagores all the way through to prevent their escape. Now, the Grail Reliquary is isolated. It's annoying to have to spend time trying to kill it, because Albrecht, meanwhile, is chunking down my Temple Guard, who have gotten a little bit too far away from the Death Star. You can see 2 of my Temple Guard units a little bit far outside the box, and that lets Albrecht and the Questing Knights prey on them a little bit easier. But I need to invest time in killing the Grail Relic, because if I don't, then the rest of the peasants are going to be able to hold out for way longer than they normally would be able to. And the more meat shields there are in the field, the easier it is for Shetland Apache to do what he wants to do with the highly mobile stuff, for the rear charges, the hammer and anvils, and things that make Bretonnia so powerful. So Hippogriff Knights did go for a cycle charge on my Sacred Croxagores. He's getting a lot of poison shots going in there too. But there's also the downside to it, which is the friendly fire. Anytime he tries to goon out my dinos, if he has poison archers firing in, he's also debuffing his own stuff. So it's kind of a wash in a lot of these situations. A nice banishment, gonna get the peasant archers moving and kill a bunch of them. Didn't have a lot of ammo, but to be honest, at this point, there's not a whole lot left for me to cast those banishments on. Shetland has not blobbed up with his cavalry at all. In fact, he's made sure his knights are very separated to make sure they don't all get caught in one overcast out of Ammontok, which could lose him the game outright. So his micro has been pretty on point so far. And the balance bar and the relative strength of both armies in terms of their elites and their win conditions, what remains on the battlefield, is pretty even too. He managed to rout the Star Chamber Guardians, who are now out of the box completely, and that will make them prey. You can see them getting charged in the background and they're going to be dead. I didn't actually see that charge. I didn't brace for them at all. Probably could have held out a little bit longer with that unit, but now that they're gone, or outside the box rather, I can't support them, and they're probably going to die. But these kind of late game blobs certainly are advantageous to the children of the old ones. It's exactly why I brought this kind of build in the first place. Being mobile is a huge advantage in a lot of situations, but when Cav is forced to charge Temple Guard that are supported by dinosaurs, they can have a very bad time. Still, Shetland Apache and the Bretonnians are doing a great job of breaking off many of my troops, and my control groups have gotten screwed up at this point, so now what we gotta do is just hold down the fort for a minute here. It looks like the ammunition is about to run out on the vast majority of the peasant bowmen, and we just need to weather the storm. So Temple Guard out on each flank, gonna box up a little bit, break through that Grail Reliquary, and then if necessary, start pushing through in our new Death Star, which is more like a, well, it's not a Death Star anymore. It's the sad, tattered remnants of a long-forgotten empire. The Temple Guard, they're not going to be around for too much longer, man. Look at them. They are severely beaten up. And Albrecht is still at half HP, and he still has the support of the Life Mage, who, of course, I wasn't ever really going to be able to catch up to and slice her down. So he's gotten full use out of all his peasant archers, out of all his Lore of Life, out of a lot of his cavalry, and we are getting into the late game here. But things are starting to look a little bit up. He's been worn down. This is a war of attrition. The Lizardmen are good at fighting because they're just so tanky. They're not fragile at all. You got big HP pools, big armor pools, and the Scarvet is still full HP after everything. And I don't have any Lore of Life either, so it's not like I've been healing him. He just hasn't really been able to invest on the Scarvet at all. Was thinking about Overcast Net of Amontok to tie down Albrecht and the Hippogriff Knights, because if those die, this game is over. I do have an advantage now, but if he alpha strikes on top of my Scarvet or on the Sacred Crossagors and kills both, then this could easily shift back. Waited for the net there, could have done it on the Questing Knights, waited on the Hippogriff Knights, so I didn't fully commit, didn't end up casting it. Scarvet still got a couple attacks in and managed to do some damage. Pharaoh Bastillodon after everything. Haven't really had to control it or worry about Rampage. Haven't had to cast Cold-Blooded on him at all. Very nice play. Look at the way he caught out those Saurus Spears there. Just waited until a unit was outside the box, then just pounced on it. But this is why you bring Lore of Light in this situation. It's not just that Barona's Time Warp, which is amazing against Bretonnia, Chaos, and Norska anyway, but you bring the net because anytime they decide to dive in and overcommit, this is what happens. Scarvet gets to take a few attacks into the butt of Albrecht. They board a low on top of his Hippogriff, and from there, it's game, set, match, and Balance Bar is going to swing all the way. Army Losses kicks in, and Lizardmen aren't able to take it. Now, like I said, this is a difficult matchup for Bretonnia, and I think you can see why. When you're looking at a build like this one, if you're trying to counter Bretonnia, Chaos, or Norska, it's certainly the kind of build you might want to go for. Temple Guard, when infused with Barona's Time Warp, are a mean-spirited bunch that can trade really well or outright smash many infantry units in this game. We'll still lose to Swordmasters or Chosen Great Weapons, that kind of thing, but it really makes them a much scarier unit against all comers, and that's the strength of a build like this one. It's designed to buzzsaw its way through infantry and large targets alike, and just outgrind you on the back of that Slann Mage Priest, which has its downsides too. If the Slann gets isolated and killed, the Death Star will crumble. If the Scarvet gets picked off, this build will crumble. It has very minimal maneuverability, so you are ceding a lot of agency to your opponent, but it's got some pretty interesting strengths and weaknesses that can make for some battles that are really great if your opponent knows how to capitalize. A lot of back and forth there. Sacred Crossagors were a wild card pick here that I was extremely happy with. 99 kills on them, much of that on Elite Cav. They were fantastic that game when fighting alongside the Carnosaur. Very well-rounded unit, but yeah, pretty niche. Don't want to be bringing that against factions with better range DPS or artillery. They will get shreked. For Shetland Apache, Albrecht was a great pick here. His Braid Aboard Low provides Hippos and Questing Knights with the additional punch they need against Dinos. That plus 10 or plus 15 bonus for large, whatever it is a huge deal. And his micro was solid overall, but I think perhaps more time needed to be invested on taking out the Slann Mage Priest, the Crossagors, and the Scarvet, which is easier said than done, obviously. But there were times each of those were isolated from the box, and that's the time for him to strike. Because if you allow those to rampage around all game long, even with Lore of Life on your side, it's hard for Bretonnia to win that war of attrition. They aren't about that staying power at all. A quick strike to cut off the Serpent's head is how Bretonnia wins this matchup. So, hope you guys enjoyed this look. I hope it gives you some better insight into my picks and mindset when playing multiplayer. And if you like it, we'll be doing some more soon. Have a bunch of battles I live recorded, and we do the same kind of format again if it's something you enjoy. Stay safe, stay classy, and have a good one, guys. Peace out.